stone is a great building material. It's hard, it's tough, it's durable, it lasts hundreds of years. But some stones do last longer than others, and all stone eventually will weather. And so it can be particularly helpful to have a technique, a way of creating the effect of weathered stone when we have very weathered structures, which in Australia is quite often, because the most common stone that was used several hundred years ago was sandstone, which does weather fairly quickly, relatively quickly, and it's not particularly hard, so little bits break off as well. And in a former convict settlement in Tasmania, I came across this quaint little architectural subject, which is actually a fountain of some sort. This is actually the back of the fountain. On the other side that we can't see, there was a half bowl attached to the front with just a pipe coming out of the wall to, I imagine, pour water into the bowl for the use of whoever was walking past. So I thought it was a great subject to draw because it does have a fairly battered look. So how do we capture the architectural shape of this and also convey the weathered look of the stone? And you'll notice that the important thing I've done with these two sections that are probably closest and most obvious visually is I've drawn them with dotted dashed lines. And I've done that because a straight line, a clean straight line, would give a very hard edge that may be suitable for fresh cut marble, cut and polished marble, which does have a very sharp edge, but it's not suitable for a nice rounded corner where the edge has been weathered off, where small pieces have been knocked off. And so I leave space between the lines, either to in itself create the effect of weathering, or to give myself room to add more lines, to make little nicks appear, or little weathering at that point, or to put shadow into something. So I'm leaving those as they are for now because I don't want to get overly involved in that detail till I've worked out the overall shape, at least of the front section, this main section. It can be a mistake to rush to detail too quickly, because once we've put the detail in, it's very hard if we then want to change our lines too much. I'm actually recording this in the bush just on dusk, and those cicadas have just started. And I don't have my microphone on me, but I need to sort of do this now so I can get it done. So if the sound quality's a little bit muffled, or the noise of the Australian insects is a bit too much, I'm sorry, but hopefully the demo will still be valuable. And this is the beautiful location where I am right now, with the cicadas strengthening their burst of noise every so often, and then dropping back and then bursting forth again. It really is quite amazing and beautiful. And so I'm doing the detail now, but I'm trying to keep my lines fairly loose and not to get a really sharp look, sharp feel to it. The important thing always with a subject such as this is to get our major perspective lines angled correctly, particularly in the first parts that we draw, and then as we move up, we know we just have to keep increasing the angle slightly. Eye level is quite high in this. It's actually just below the top of these fluted pilasters. I'm taking a little more care than normal with these lines because I do want to get that shadow effect. Now, with foreshortening, these lines are going to be a single line each rather than the double lines that I've got on the other side. And I was thinking after I finished, what I should have done was in those fluted sections, I should have just done a few little dots to indicate a slight disturbance of the stone surface, a slight shadow being caused by a little bit that's been knocked out. I mean, it doesn't really happen in the reference that way, but I think it would have made a nice addition just in one or two spots. The other trick with this sort of thing is not to overdo it. That when there's something that creates a good effect, not to put it on every surface, on every corner, on every edge. Because that then just becomes a bit overpowering. I'm using a 0.2 millimeter Copic fine liner. And in real time, this drawing took me 20 minutes to do. So it is a fairly brisk drawing, but I wanted to keep a sense of gesture in my marks, because I thought that was probably going to create a little bit of a roughness in the finish, which again I thought would nicely work in. And I didn't want to start labouring the details that are here. And if you're finding this helpful and useful, why not hit the like button? Why not share the video with a friend who draws? I knew I was also going to do the hatching to create the shadows. There's not a huge amount of shadow on this, but this inset section in the centre, I think the shadow is quite important for that. And if I'm going to do that, I might as well do the other bits of shadow that we have. So it's not my best arch. I should have pushed that capstone decoration just slightly further to the left and just rounded that arch up a little more. The half on the right hand side, it just sags a bit at the top. And so now trying to work out how I'm going to do these stones. I'm making these marks between the stones heavier than I normally would, because I know I'm going to put hatching lines in front of them. And if I don't have them reasonably heavy, they're going to disappear completely when I add the hatching. And so here I go. The only rule about the direction, how we do our hatching, our cross hatching, is whatever creates the effect we're after best is almost certainly the best approach. And so sometimes it's worth experimenting a little. Sometimes it's worth doing a thumbnail of a section such as this and just to play around with the different possibilities of line direction. But my general principle with hatching is always try and reflect the underlying form that the shadow or the shade or the colour that we're hatching to create the effect of has, so that our hatch lines don't become like a fly screen, like a wire gauze just placed in front of certain parts of our drawing, but it clings to the surface. Our shadows are moulded as much as we can to our structure and therefore reflecting the lines. So I am holding my pen back a little bit further, consciously holding it further up, because I find the further up I hold it, the faster I draw, basically. The more gestural I become. And if my hands are lower down, it's because I'm focusing on going slower. I want to have more control over smaller areas. This is a relatively small drawing. And the size that we do our drawing also affects the pen we use and the technique, the amount of line we put on, and some of the effects that we create and the way we create them are also determined by how large our drawing is. The smaller our drawing becomes, the more we have to leave out certain features. So I always count spots like that and work out if it's an even or an odd number. If it's an odd number, then there's one that's right in the centre. If there's an even number, then the gap between two of those spaces is right in the middle. I think it's good, if possible, to get the right number. It just keeps the scale of what we're doing correct. So now I've just got this decorative part on top. There's a little more decoration from the front up top. It's a little bit plainer at the back, but I actually thought it looked a little more elegant from the rear than from the front. And then we have these stepped back pyramids on top of these overhanging cornice squares. And now I'm just finishing off this last bit. And then I just need to suggest a bit of context for this. I have put some pencil lines around the outside of the image just to help me both locate and align what I draw, but also just to tell me where to stop. with this extra bit. I didn't want to have it just sitting there by itself. And I put in this little roof because it helps with scale. We recognise, hopefully, that this is a house, and therefore it gives us a sense of how large or small that is, and therefore how far away it is. I realised there was some shadow here. Now, shadow is actually darker than shade. So shadow is where the light is blocked from reaching an object by another object. Shade is where that part of the object is turned away from the light, and so the light just doesn't reach it. And so now I decide to make these trees fairly dark to give them a strong value, because they're a nice contrast to the light value of the sandstone. So just working on that a little bit, and now darkening some of the values inside this. It looks like it's a niche for a statue, but I don't think a statue was ever designed to go here. Not in a convict settlement. This is right on the southeast section of Tasmania. There's not much of Australia that's not closer to Antarctica than this place. There aren't many places in the world closer to Antarctica than Port Arthur. G'day, I'm Stephen Travers. Look, I hope you found this helpful. I hope you have a go drawing it. It's a great sort of effect to try and create. Weathered stone. Really useful to have a sense of what marks create this effect, because we can come across it in all sorts of times and subjects and drawing moments. But look, whatever you draw, however you draw it, knocked about and weathered or brand new, make sure you have fun. I'll see you next time. Bye.